This is a Pubcast Shot. I'm John Loomer.
Today, we're going to talk about whether you still need to use interests and behaviors.
Let's go.
So on a prior episode, we talked about whether lookalike audiences were still relevant and whether you should completely abandon them now. And while this is a similar concept with interests and behaviors, or detailed targeting as it's known, it's not entirely the same. And my advice here is a little bit different, okay? So now originally, similar to what we were talking about with the lookalike audiences, right? Detailed targeting, which is interests and behaviors and everything goes on within those definitions, were incredibly helpful and important. I still remember when they were first made available, it was a really big deal because it could help you isolate your ideal customer. And really, our targeting inputs determine the success or failure of our advertising. So that meant it was a really important role of the advertiser to define this properly and probably spend a ton of time testing different combinations because some were productive, some weren't. And it was actually kind of fun and interesting to figure that out. And we had access to partner categories on buyer histories and user personas like soccer moms and so much more. To understand what to do with this now, the first thing is Meta's eliminated a lot of detailed targeting options, and you probably know that. Meta's faced a ton of lawsuits and discrimination charges. It's why we've run into things like special ad categories, and advertisers were using them to manipulate elections, as we know, and using them in discriminatory ways for things like credit and employment and real estate and so much more, right? So second, Advantage Plus Audience is now the recommended default. So if you're providing those inputs, those detailed targeting inputs with Advantage Plus Audience, they're only suggestions, and based on my experience, they're probably ignored for the most part. But even if you're using original audiences, your audience is often expanded. I'm still convinced that a lot of advertisers don't realize this. When they're using original audiences and providing detailed targeting, they think that that is a strict constraint, and it often is not. So if your performance goal, you're optimizing for conversions or link clicks or landing page views, the audience is expanded. And while algorithmic targeting and audience expansion aren't perfect, they're impossible to avoid in certain circumstances like these. So the results of that is that it's just really kind of silly to waste a ton of time and energy on figuring out which interests and behaviors you should target. Because ultimately, in those cases where you really don't have much control, Meta's going to show your ads to the people it wants to show your ads to. All right, so in general, I don't really use detailed targeting at all anymore. Now, there may be one potential exception, and that would be for times when your audience isn't expanded, right? So you, again, would be using original audiences and your performance goal is optimizing for through play or post engagement or even instant form leads, really anything other than conversions, link clicks, or landing page views. Now, understand that optimization is extremely flawed for anything other than a conversion. I've long complained about this. It's a whole other topic because ultimately, Meta will get you as many of the action that you want within your budget. That's the algorithm's goal. So it's going to find you a ton of cheap engagement or clicks or whatever it is that you're asking for, because the algorithm doesn't realize that you care what those people do after that initial action. Now, that's also why it's not a problem for purchases typically. The algorithm and you are on the same page. You want purchases, and it's going to try to find those purchases for you. Now, I wouldn't recommend these other optimizations, right, for through play and post engagement and things like that generally, but I understand that sometimes you just might not have any other options, or you may have very few options. So if you are going to do that, look, Meta needs guardrails in that case, because otherwise it has full reign to get you as many of those through plays or whatever you've asked for within your budget. And it needs those guardrails to say, okay, well, at least if you're going to do that, make sure that they match these interests and behaviors, these detailed targeting options. So it may help to use those in that case to define your audience. Now, when I talk about eliminating detailed targeting, generally, you may think that's crazy, right? Because you've done this for years, you're determined and just convinced that it's really important and useful. But I would encourage you, especially if optimizing for a purchase, test using those detailed targeting options versus not. And honestly, probably use Advantage Plus Audience in that case. The algorithm is likely ignoring those inputs anyway, okay? So understand that those inputs just aren't nearly as impactful as they once were. And the bottom line with all of this is to continue to question your assumptions. Otherwise, we would just keep doing what we are always doing from day one, and that would be a really bad idea. Things change, and the environment we're working in to try to be successful changes, and you also need to adjust with those changes.
Before we wrap up here, just one quick word about one of the many ways that I can help you. So whether you're running an agency or running ads for others or running ads for yourself, maybe you need a little bit of extra help. I set aside 45-minute blocks where I run one-on-one sessions where we can walk through your individual advertising challenges to come up with a solution, a strategy, a way forward to break through whatever obstacles you may be facing. Now, these sessions aren't for everybody. I highly recommend that you're already spending at least a few $1,000s per month in ads. So then when we have this 45-minute session, you'll have at least 1, 2, 3 takeaways that could potentially make a difference. This isn't about a magic wand that will fix everything for you. It's about helping you better understand how advertising works and what obstacles you may be creating for yourself, and maybe having some specific things to try to see if it fixes your problem. So if you're interested in setting up a one-on-one with me, go to johnloomer.com/coach. Thanks again for joining me today. Until next time, do awesome things. I'm out.